you want to go ahead and start recording? I believe that you already started. So I just want to welcome everyone to today's Mentor Mondays. Before we get started, just want to quickly acknowledge the land. And I'll start off by saying we would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather has been and still is the traditional territory of several indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Since time immemorial, numerous indigenous nations and indigenous peoples have lived and passed through this territory. We recognize this territory is covered by the Dish and the One Spoon Treaty and the Two-Row Treaty, which emphasizes the importance of joint stewardship, peace, and respectful relationships. Shared and affirms it is our collective responsibility to honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who have yet to come. We're grateful for the opportunity to be working and living on this land. All right. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Quick Zoom orientation. Seems like most of you be familiar with, so I'll just quickly go through the Zoom platform. We've got Simi, who is behind the scenes helping us out with any troubleshooting, anything on the Zoom platform, accepting people into the Mentor Mondays today. So welcome, Simi. Thank you so much for your help with today. And as you arrive, you'll most likely be muted. Just make sure that when we have a Q&A or when you want to share your perspective, your insights, just turn on your mic, and as well as, if you're comfortable, your video. Most likely there will be an opportunity for us to take a screenshot at some point that Simi can help us with. So if you want to turn off your video when the time comes, we'll make sure to announce that in advance. Aside from that, quickly go through our agenda today. Welcome to everyone. And we're going to do some introductions. We're going to introduce our guest. We're going to continue the conversation around human-centered design. We're going to zoom in a little bit more into the research phase or inspiration phase, and Kanika, our guest today, will go into that, and then we'll wrap up with a Q&A and share some perspectives. Real quick, most of you who are here are part of the EDGE community, and so as you may have experienced, we are an innovation and impact entrepreneurship hub. We run these Mentor Mondays to support the community with relevant learning opportunities that will hopefully impact their ventures now and in the future. We want to put together a platform for experienced individuals like Kanika to share their professional and entrepreneurship experience, as well as bring in the perspectives of our founders who also have experience with entrepreneurship or even in their journey as professionals. And we also want to be able to have a place where we create a stronger bond between our community at EDGE as well as beyond the EDGE community. We have 4 programs. So we have our Explore program, where we focus mostly on entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs at the ideation stage. We have our Leap program, where we support mostly folks or entrepreneurs and at the discovery stages, where they're working on a defined business idea and validating a little bit more their value proposition. We have a RISE program, where we aim to support entrepreneurs in their validation phases, where they're building on a solid foundation to get more traction and developing their business offering. And then our SOAR program, which is a program that we have for folks who already have a venture growth and they are refining their minimum viable product, and they're preparing to reach scale. Traditionally, we would have a place where we all would convene and hang out. We have a hub, we have co-working space, and obviously we offer the community aspect as well. But for the little while until we we go through the hopefully, the pandemic situation comes to an end soon, we can get back into in-person meetings. But for now, everything we're doing virtually. And yeah, if you want to stay in the loop, we're pretty active on main 3 social media platforms, and we have a website as well on there if you wanted to connect with us. And I just want to take a moment to introduce Kanika. Kanika, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us again on this follow-up conversation around human-centered design. And maybe you can talk a little bit about yourself if you're comfortable with that, and share with us what got you so interested in the impact space, as a random question, let's just say.
All right. Thank you, Diego and Simi. So I think I recognize most of your names and your faces, so it's really nice to see some people return. And I'm also really happy to be back and continue the conversation about human-centered design. I am a researcher, a market researcher. I'm a strategist, a facilitator. My experience has been in consulting corporations for a number of years. And just kind of in the past year, I changed my life a little bit and quit my consulting full-time job and wanted to pursue the impact industry. So that's kind of what I've been doing over the past year, transferring those skills into more of the impact industry, working more with social entrepreneurs like yourselves, with NGOs, nonprofits, and just kind of balancing both of those worlds at this point. But yeah, what really excites me is to help entrepreneurs like yourself. So I'm really excited to be here and share a little bit more, dig a little bit more into human-centered design.
Thank you so much for that, Kanika. It's great to have you join us. And myself, I'm the one of the entrepreneurs. I'm also an entrepreneur, but also a mentor here at Edge, and I support the mentorship program by connecting our members to our mentors, who are either mentors in residence or also to our extended community of support experts and mentors such as Kanika. And I want to maybe get some introductions going. I think this is a great opportunity for everyone here to, if you'd like to jump in and maybe pitch us your business, and maybe a good practice to share about what you're up to and what your business is all about. And it definitely will help with context as we kind of dig into the human-centered design, specifically the research phase. It will help to get some more context so that maybe we can kind of individualize our approach a little bit more. So I'm hoping we get a brave, courageous soul today to jump in and pitch us tell us about your business and what you're up to.
Hi, my name is Favor, and I just launched a digital marketing agency this month, and I'm in the beginning stage, speaking to prospects, and yeah, that's where I'm at in my business.
Favor, tell us what the area are you focusing on in digital marketing? I know you're doing something a little more niche.
Yeah, yes, that's true. I'm in the plumbing and HVAC businesses, home service companies that are looking to get more customers and sales through the internet. And my goal would be to connect with as much people that I could this month. I already had my first sales call, and it's been looking good. I look to start with this one client in November, but now I'm working on campaigns that I could use to reach out to a more massive group of plumbing and HVAC owners, and looking to speak to them in the next couple of weeks or so.
Great stuff. Appreciate that, Favor.
Awesome.
Thanks.
And by the way, feel free to add in there if you want to add in your social media, your websites, you want to, LinkedIn's, if you haven't connected amongst each other before we get the next person to share with us what they're up to. Just wanted to throw that out there. But anyone would like to jump in next?
Sure. My name is Chris, and I'm a high school teacher, and my social venture is to create an e-learning platform that will help teachers, students, and parents, and basically just to get them to work more collaboratively together and to increase the participation on online platforms.
Awesome. Nice and concise. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that.
Yep, no worries.
Hi, I'm Crystal. Hopefully my kid won't make too much background noise right now. My company's called Leo Han, stands for Living in Our Here and Now. And we create entertaining activities for families to bond, learn, and grow together. And with everyone being super busy, and especially now, you'd think we have more time together, right? Being stuck at home, but it's still very difficult to make that space for quality time. So one of the reasons I'm particularly interested in human-centered design is how do I help people make that space so that they can actually leverage our services to solve their pain. And a quick example is even just scheduling. I found that helping people schedule and coming from a place of empathy seems to make a big difference. So thanks for today's workshop.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal. Who do we have left? Let me just take a look at our list here. Got.
I can go next.
Sure. Thanks, John.
Hey. So yeah, my name is John. Yeah, thanks for holding this session. This is really great. My venture is basically solving the problem for sustainable shopping. So there's so much information that's out there in terms of what is sustainable, what is ethical. You're looking at organic to fair trade to made local, and even within each category like fashion, the fabrics, everything comes into play. There's so much information. So what I'm trying to do is have the community come together, and through reviews that are three-tiered, overall, social, environmental, recommending brands and stores nearby that are ethical. And these recommendations can come from kind of bloggers or just kind of friends and family, people you trust. So trying to create this kind of like a Yelp version of except for sustainable, for ethical, and also started a blog called Local Ethical, which I'll include on the chat. Basically, it's like kind of, I think, blog TO, where it lists out the top 20 fashion stores or top 20 like grocery stores that are in Toronto. So kind of playing with this, still an idea phase, but kind of playing around with it because this is something that I'm really passionate about. Yeah.
Awesome. Good stuff. Appreciate that, John.
For the time.
And so we have Julian who's left, but Julian, feel free to jump in, or if you even want to use the chat to tell us a little bit about what you're up to, and we'll give you maybe a couple of seconds and see if you like to jump in. All right. So let's go ahead and carry on. What I want to do now is hand it over to Kanika. If you want to go ahead and pop in your slides. Let me just stop sharing here, and should be good to go. Let me know let Simi know if you have to choose.
I think it should be fine. You guys see
Here we
that?
are. Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, great. Okay, so here we go. Because I believe most of you were in the last Mentor Mondays where I shared kind of the overview of human-centered design. We're going to dig into, as mentioned, the first phase, which is the research phase. And I'll start off with a refresher, but also I see there are probably a couple of new names and anybody on the recording, going back to some of the kind of the higher level things that we covered. So first, what is human-centered design? So it is an approach to designing solutions that's based on the understanding and the needs of the, sorry, an understanding of the needs and the desires of the people who interact with or are impacted by the offering. And again, it is a process, it's a tool, it's not, you know, one prescriptive way to design something, but it does take into account the experience and the lives of the people that you are going to be designing for. So Crystal gave a great example of needing to understand a little bit more about maybe some of the barriers that people have in being able to make time with their for their families and with their families. And that's a great kind of question that we can use human-centered design to answer. Last time I shared this 3-step or 3-phase process by IDEO.org. And the reason I shared this was it's accessible online for free for anybody to use. And I think it's a really great summary of the kind of 3 overall steps that one can take when they're embarking on a human-centered design process. The first phase is inspiration or research, and this is the phase we're going to be really digging into today. And this is all about learning and researching the people that you are innovating for. The second phase is ideation. So once you have those insights, once you have the knowledge and the understanding, you can, and the kind of the bigger picture, then you can start to think of all of the possible opportunities or solutions that can be created. And after that comes implementation. And this is actually implementing the solution. So putting it into action. How are you going to measure it? How are you going to scale it? How will you fund it? All of that will go into it. So just as a reference link, here's that link to the process. And just, I guess I'm pretty curious who from the people who were here and did go through this had a chance to check out the website last time, or had a chance to check out any of the tools. And you can use the chat too. Yeah, Diego, Crystal, I see some hands. I don't have the chat open actually, so I'm not tracking that, but awesome, good. So we'll dig into it a bit more for sure. So as I mentioned, we will be talking more about the research or the inspiration phase in the next little bit. And last time I shared this slide as well. So human-centered design begins with insights. Insights are the needs, the challenges, or the tensions that affect a group of people or an ecosystem. And Crystal, I'm going to use your example again because I think it was so great. You mentioned families struggle with even scheduling this quality time with one another. And that's a great insight because that gives you some more knowledge to create some other solutions or some offering that maybe you can help them schedule or help them overcome in some way. So I'm going to now for the next, for the rest of this little presentation, go through the steps of research of how to actually conduct research. These are steps I shared before, but I didn't dig too much into, but this time I'll go through each one in detail, but just as a summary and as a reminder. The first step in conducting research and getting to the place where you're going to be obtaining insights is to identify your hypothesis, assumptions, and objectives. So what are the things that you're questioning going into research? What are the assumptions you're making? What are the objectives that are going to be tested, the learning objectives that are going to be tested? Next is designing the research. So I'll talk deeper into that as well. Making a research plan, so actually planning for it, conducting the research, and last is to analyze and organize the insights once the research has been conducted. So the first step is identifying your hypotheses, your assumptions, your objectives. And this is really all about defining what the learning objectives are for the research. So it depends, right? What questions you have, what phase of your journey you're in, what problem you're dealing with right now. Is it exploratory research? So are you really in the very beginning and you just want to know if there's even appetite for your idea? So maybe you're doing exploratory research, or you already have a platform, an app or something like that, and you want to start to do user testing. That would be your objective. Maybe you already have some insights and you want to validate them. Maybe you have some process or some service design aspect to your offering or customer experience that you want to test out and see what that process is like or what that flow is like. So there are different, and the list goes on. These are just some examples, but it's really important up front. What is it that you're testing or going into research for? Then it's really good practice to list all of the assumptions and the hypotheses. So we did a little exercise last time on assumptions, and they're really important because we may think we know something, but that's just really from our own perspectives. And somebody who's living in a different condition, a different environment, sometimes a different country, a different culture, may perceive things completely differently. So that's really important to understand and therefore identify as well. So we may think we know things, but really best practice is to always test them and validate them. And one really important tool is establishing your ecosystem map if you haven't already. So often this will be part of kind of an earlier development tool or task that you do. But if you haven't already, who are all of the people that may be impacted by your innovation? So oftentimes it's not only your customers, it could be the beneficiaries, it could be the payers, it could be government, it could be other communities. And sometimes those are the same people, sometimes they're not. And the more that we get into social enterprise and the impact sector, the more these entities are different and often the more players there are in the ecosystem. So that's really important as well. After that is designing research. So once you've identified your learning objectives in the previous step, and we talked about the ecosystem map, identify who makes most sense to research, right? So if you want to research your pricing model, you're not going to go after necessarily the beneficiaries if they're going to be receiving it for free, if somebody else is going to be paying for it. You want to, if you're testing a pricing model, you want to talk to the people that will be paying for the product. So that's why it's really important to have that kind of ecosystem map and then match it with your learning objectives. And also based on your objectives, which research method makes the most sense. So I talked about this already, which is, are you user testing? Are you going to be validating something? What is it that you're doing? There are different kinds or different methods of research that are available. So there's desk research, which is secondary research. You're using already what's available on the internet, maybe in the library, if depending on what your topic is, but probably we'll all use the internet at this point for perusing kind of the online presence of maybe competitors. That could be part of desk research. It could be looking into literature that's published already, other reports, industry reports, white papers, stuff like this. Or does it make more sense to do a survey? So a survey is really good to do if you already have some insights already and you want to test or kind of confirm them. It's really hard to make a survey if you kind of don't know a lot already, because a survey generally you need to give different options or answers for the questions, and you need to know what those are and they need to be relevant. So it's good to do a survey a little bit later, in my opinion. In the beginning, if you're kind of just an exploratory, interviews are great, focus groups are great, observation as well, depending on what it is that you want to do. You can do A/B testing, ethnography. So you have all of these options. And I've also just added another link to the design kit. They have a small directory on the methods and also some step-by-step instructions on how to use those methods. So that's something that could be a useful tool. And the last part of designing research is creating a discussion guide. So based on who you're going to speak to and based on the kind of method you're going to use, you have to create what it is that you're going to use to test or to actually conduct the research. So if it's a survey, then you're going to make a survey. If it's an interview, then probably it'll be some sort of list of questions that will help you guide the discussion with the person and can help conduct your interviews. And that's really important to create up front. So that way, when you're in the interview, you're not kind of thinking of things and having to kind of create questions out of nowhere. And this way also you have consistency in the kind of discussion that is had with all of the respondents or with all of the people that you do interview. Okay, so you've done all of that. Then the next is to make a research plan. So right before going into research, there is some planning that needs to be done. So some of the toughest things is really how to find people. And we talked about this a little bit last time too, but just kind of as a refresher and to dig a little bit deeper, it's really great to use or find people that you're not normally speaking to. So not your direct friends, but maybe your friends of friends or their coworkers, or reaching out to different people in your LinkedIn networks, people who have different backgrounds and who have different experiences that don't always think like you. And so therefore giving you this broader and more diverse perspective. Also depends on what you're testing. Sometimes you may want to test current or past customers. You might, ask somebody to refer somebody else. All of those are options. And also making sure to account for diversity in the respondents. So this kind of goes with my previous point around including different perspectives. So different backgrounds, different experiences, different demographics as much as you can. And as long as it's aligned with that target group, right? So not to say that you always have to have representation in everything. So if your target you identify as somebody aged 20 to 30, of course, you're still going to stay in that target group for your consumer testing, but then maybe you want to diversify the backgrounds or the other experiences or the education. How long will you conduct the research for? So there's kind of two parts to this. How many interviews will you do, or how long will your interviews be or your survey be? And also how many of them will you do? How long will you actually stagger, or how will you stagger the interview schedule? So these are all questions that you need to ask and plan for. So that way you kind of know when your research will end, what the next step will be, and what the next phase will be. And this will all depend again on what your objectives are, what your methods are, how easy it is to find and recruit the respondents, all of that. How many people will be in your research? Again, generally for quantitative surveys, you want to have a higher number of answers. Upwards of 80, I would say, is good. You probably won't be getting statistical significance at that point, but that's not our aim. We just want good diversity and meaningful results. But for something qualitative, so if you're just talking to people, even as few as 12 people is okay. Getting to 20 people, interviewing 20 people takes time. It's also probably at the point where you'll see some saturation in what you're hearing. So less people, but longer time with interviews. And try to, it's good to form a research team. So they'll help you through the process. Then all of the research burden is not on you. The data will be shared. You'll have different perspectives on the analysis, and also it'll help mitigate any bias that might exist. And creating a way to track the research is also really important. It would be such a waste if we just have all these conversations, wonderful conversations, and they weren't tracked anywhere. So I find it personally very hard to do very good note taking if I'm interviewing. So I will take recordings. I'll go back to the recordings after, or have my teammate take notes for me, and then I can conduct the interview a little bit more freely, and we can do the analysis together later. Screenshots, anything that just helps you take the data home with you And then it's about conducting the research. And this step is not very hard. But again, getting help from others is helpful in this case as well, just to lower the burden of the load as well as to mitigate any bias. Also a good idea to stagger some interviews. So if, let's say you conduct the first few phases or interviews of research, you can take those learnings and then apply them to the later interviews, or maybe you already have some hypotheses confirmed or denied, so you can explore those deeper, or you can even bring in new topics that might come up. And always trying to get to the why. So we talked about this last time as well, but it's a great exercise to question the things that we hear and the things that we think we know. And a really good question to do that is why. So why is something like this? Okay, it's like this because why? So that's a little bit self-explanatory in that way, but yeah. And the last is to organize and analyze the insights. So of course, you'll have all of this data, whether it's note-taking or recordings or whatever it is, and you have to go through the data. As you're going through it, you'll see there are some common themes, some challenges, and some tensions that come up. These are going to be the insights. This is going to be what's going to be that important, I would say, the meat or the, not a very vegan friendly term, but the, the good stuff is, are the insights, the tensions, and the themes that come up. And this will help you in whatever it is you're designing. This will kind of help steer your design of the solutions. It's really good to kind of define the biggest learnings. You may come out, you may do this whole research, you may only come out with 3 big learnings, but that's really important. That might shape your entire offering if you're early stage. And then it's really moving on to the ideation. So that's that second step that I talked about. And I added this little tip, and I'm saying it's a tip because everybody has their own style on how to do analysis. But let's say you do have some questions that you ask. It's maybe it's a good idea to use an Excel sheet or something else to find your own way to do analysis, where maybe you put the questions on the top and each of the answers of the respondents below, so you can actually systematically go through and see where the themes are, where the similarities are, where the inconsistencies are. That also is telling. I've done analysis before. One of my favorite ways, it does involve sticky notes, I'll say, but essentially is putting down one question on the table, or even like a big piece of paper, putting down a question. Okay, my research question is, I don't know, why don't people buy loose leaf tea? I'm just making this up. And then on each sticky note, I'll put the answers that have come up through the research. People don't buy loose leaf tea because they don't like to see the gross tea remnants soaked up in water. Maybe that's an insight. Then they don't buy it because they don't have a compost bin. Then they don't buy it because whatever. And then I would post those as sticky notes. And then, you can step back and see what that bigger story is or what that bigger picture is, and take that into your analysis, or those will be your learnings. So that's a really fun way to do it, especially if you have a team and you can be in the same room together. Excuse my examples today. It's a very rainy Monday examples that I'm sharing, but I hope the points are going across. That's really it in terms of research. Open to any questions. And I know maybe I went fast through some of the parts, so let me know, and I can also go backwards and go into detail if I need to.
Thanks, Kanika. So this is the part of the Mentor Mondays where we hope to get some juices flowing. I know it's a gloomy Monday afternoon, but I'm curious to hear from the folks who are in today where you are at currently in if you happen to be in this stage. You may not, but or maybe you have questions about this research stage. So I'm looking to see if anyone would be willing to jump in to talk about where they find themselves currently in this process? Or if you're not, where are you at currently?
Hey, yeah, so I can just share what I was doing. So I have done primary and secondary research. I have sent out an initial, I guess, survey. And so I was able to get some results, but then I'm just finding that even though, you had that initial survey, I'm finding that, when I do get my prototype out there, there's going to be another survey that will probably go out to get even more answers, to, whether it's a good platform, et cetera. Like, it's going to be very specific to the platform. So I think for me at least anyways, the research is always continuous. It's always ongoing. And I guess for me, one of the hardest things is to try to limit the amount of bias in, the questions and what I'm researching, because I find that's sometimes hard to separate.
For sure. Any comments on that, or follow-up questions from anybody, or Kanika?
Yeah, actually, Chris, thank you for sharing. And you're totally right that research is definitely an ongoing process. And also great that you are thinking about bias. There are some, I would say, best practices in how to ask questions so they end up being less biased as well. So I think those will be maybe a good thing to look into, in that asking a lot of, avoiding closed-ended questions. So ensuring people are not just going to be answering with yes or no to something. You want to ask questions that will reveal something deeper. I'm going to use another tea analogy because that's what's in front of me right now. So instead of asking people, do you like tea, yes or no? I want to ask them, describe your experiences with tea, or, what role does tea play in the drinks that you consume? So these are a little bit more open-ended, and they can't answer with yes or no. That will just be shut down. It'll maybe hopefully open something up. And some other kind of best practices, and maybe you already know this, but avoiding leading questions. So, if I wanted to know if people like tea, instead of asking, do you like tea? That is a leading question. I would ask, what are your thoughts on tea, or what is your preference with tea? And so that way they have an option to say something besides, yes, I like tea, or no, I don't like tea.
Yeah, I guess I have a question about market research, because although I just launched a digital marketing agency, I had this idea for a wearable tech, and what I've been doing over the past two weeks just to build on the idea, I've been connecting with librarians, looking at stuff like Vivid Data, just to look at what people are buying, and your behavior, something like that. I also was able to interview somebody that was using one of the products that I would like to something like that I would like to create in the future. I was interviewing somebody, actually met the person here from Edge in this Zoom meeting. But my question is, how do you structure interview questions? Do you have any uh, like advice on how to structure interview questions, and how to get people to talk about their why? Because I understand that people could talk about like stats and stuff like that, but if I get people to really talk about how they feel and what this means to them, it will give me more information on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe I missed the part. Did you share what the idea was, or the?
Sure. The idea is, and it's really at the idea stage, but it's to I saw that in the past 12 months that 10% of Canadians bought an autotic, and so but
Right.
uh
Yeah.
70% said that because of a busy schedule, they did not have time to take care of their body, have time to exercise properly, and so forth. So the idea was to, what if I could create to make it like a Fitbit for people that have foot pain, or just if I could put that stuff in insoles that people could be able to so that I could reduce pain with how people walk, run, and sit. but also it could measure distance, calories burnt, and send that information to smart devices. It's at the idea stage, and I was doing some research with librarians, and yeah, so it's more like, as I want to speak to people like I looked at runners. I said that a lot of runners are into wearable tech. I looked at people like athletes on high levels of like sports as well. So right now I'm just looking at, I think, cold calling, or just calling like people like for doctors, and just asking them questions. So I'm just looking at how to structure those questions and get to understand what they really want.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the first step is great, which is you're identifying all the people you can potentially talk to learn more. Another maybe suggestion is nurses. They're on their feet a lot all day. So anybody who's on their feet during the day would be somebody good for you to talk to. Librarians, like you're already on that, great. In terms of structuring the discussion guide, or what I call a discussion guide, is you want to start with the most kind of general discussion, or the most general topic in the beginning. So and then kind of goes more specific from there, because if you start with something really specific in the beginning, that's going to kind of prime the whole conversation. It's going to bias the whole conversation. So you want to start with something really general. You want to ask them about, their work, how often, maybe how long they're standing, if they experience foot pain, or what kind of foot pain they experience. And then maybe you want to also assess, what already exists in their realm of solutions. So what are the kind of things they're already using, what's working well and what's not working well? These are really good questions as well. Like, when you want to dig a little bit deeper into the existing solutions, figuring out what's working, what's not working, right? And then once they give you an answer to that, why or why not? And that's where you have the opportunities to go a little bit deeper. And then once you've, find out what's working with their current solutions, what's not working, what would they improve overall? Why do they want to improve it? And then you might start to introduce, your own idea or something new, or, make a suggestion like, what have you heard about X technology or XYZ technology, or what do you think about this? Right. So maybe you want to test an idea there. Maybe you want to test their appetite for this new thing. Right. So then you can start to introduce a little bit more. And if you're ever introducing price, you want to do it at the end. So how much would you be willing to pay? That's kind of what you want to do near the end. You don't want to start with that. You don't want to have that in the middle. So that's kind of the general structure. But I would say, like, an upside down pyramid, going from broad to narrow, and just remembering those open-ended questions, going into the why. And I think, and this is something it sounds like you're already doing, but just, getting to know them as a person, and I think things will flow.
Sounds good. Thanks.
I've got a question from Miriam, over in the chat box, and she asks, "What platform?" Sorry, I've lost the question here. What platform is user friendly, quote unquote, acceptable when performing general market research? For example, for small business or neighborhood preference favorite. So I think what she's asking is what is out there that could be used for credible, reputable market research.
Yeah. I guess my question is it to conduct your own market research, or to obtain secondary research, obtain some research that is already conducted? That's my question back, but I can just give some answers to both anyways. For conducting your own surveys or your own market research, you can use things like, if you're doing an online kind of not an interview style, you can use things like Google Forms or SurveyMonkey. All those platforms work really well. You can use, of course, Zoom, conduct your own. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So you can use Zoom. It's free for one-on-one. You can have as long of a conversation as you want. You can use Zoom is great also because then you can record the conversation. But of course, you'll have to just get the consent of the respondent to do that. But really, it's whatever works. I've done it over the phone. Small business or neighborhood preference favorite. Yeah, and maybe even a survey would be good in that case. So Google Forms. These are all tools that you probably already use like in daily things, in other things. So it's just a matter of, using them in a different way. There are some other tools like I've been using Google Jamboard, which is kind of cool. And Google Jamboard, if I don't know if all of you have used it, but pretty much it's available to anyone with Google Drive. And you can just put a question at the top and then have people, especially if you have like multiple people on the same document, just have them put in the answer using digital sticky notes. So that's another way to do it.
I kind of had an idea just now, just given we have all these really great questions about how to do interviews and surveys. And a lot of the companies that are in Edge, right, are maybe in a similar stage. And I'm curious if Edge would ever be able to facilitate, say, like whoever wants to ask other people questions and practice asking questions and help answer people's questions. Maybe we could get into a Zoom call and then do like 5-minute breakout rooms where you get paired with random people and just keep switching. So you have 5 minutes, and yes, you might not get the person who's the exact demographic or whatever you're looking for, but maybe it's still a good way to practice how you ask your questions, get some feedback on that actual method, and then hopefully you get some good answers that you can use as well. Because even for me, for example, even though I right now am focused on families with young children, I can still ask anyone who doesn't even have kids of their own, for example, questions, right? Saying, what was your experience like when you were a child? So I imagine maybe others could find a way to, tweak their questions, even if they don't get their ideal, like target kind of client in the pairing.
That is an awesome suggestion. I wrote that down, Crystal, because we don't have that. And I think it'd be very useful. Because like you said, a lot of members are in a very similar stages, and it could be great even for entrepreneurs who like want to not only get feedback for their approach as far as creating questions and asking questions, but they may even be able to use that as their own research, just to be able to capture some insights from those conversations. So thank you for proposing that. I made a note of it.
Yeah, awesome idea. Miriam, I see you've just asked a follow-up question. So how do you propose, I guess, the research idea to them? Really, in any way you have contact with them. So it depends on how you find whoever you're finding. If you're finding them on LinkedIn, you can shoot them a LinkedIn message. You can send them an email if you have their email. You can even call them to ask if you can share a survey or schedule an interview. So there's no right or wrong way, like as long as you can get in touch with them. It's totally fine to interview, to ask them.
Yeah, I would add to that, and curious to hear your thoughts around the importance of mapping out. And I think you mentioned that you did mention this as part of the mapping of the ecosystem. And understanding the actors within that let's say that market or again that ecosystem that could help kind of narrow down who you're reaching out to, and then see how they engage the most. Some people may be more active on LinkedIn. You may be able to reach out to them through there. Some people may not be very active on the internet. Maybe you can phone them up. So can you speak to a little bit about the importance of mapping out your ecosystem, and maybe add in there, should you be out there asking or finding more about the people who you're looking to serve while you're mapping out the ecosystem, or should you map the ecosystem first before getting out there?
Yeah, I think it's a good practice to map your ecosystem first. It may be, a case may exist where you can only know more about your ecosystem by doing your research. And in that case, that's okay. Then, you're going out to learn more about, okay, who are the players who are, I know this community is going to be affected by my enterprise. Maybe I don't know there's another community. So it's possible that you do learn more about your ecosystem as you're doing the research, but it's really good practice from the beginning to have this map, just to have an idea of who are the people that are going to be impacted in any which way. And once you have this map, it also becomes easier, like who are the people you're going to be directly affecting, who are maybe the decision makers later on, or who is going to be affected, further down this chain. And as I mentioned, the people who may pay for something are not the same people who use the product. So again, it will depend on your question, but it's a good idea to have this map in the beginning. So then, then you kind of know where to go, and that will be how you will orient yourself in kind of your market and your space.
Yeah.
Miriam, I hope I answered your question. Feel free to type in more if you have any follow-ups.
Actually, I had something to add. I think Crystal and made a great point with that group. I actually went through. So Mars offers this course. It's called Customer Immersive 101 or something. Customer Immersive, and I found that very helpful. And Diego, they did something similar. So it might be something that you want to check out if you want to create if you want like an idea of how to form that, because I think what they did was they essentially had people come into groups and then ask questions, and then they would kind of course, answer them, but also talk about the questions themselves. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking into it, but if you happen to have a direct link.
Yeah, Customer Immersive from Mars.
I found this just really quick, but I'll make a note of it, and then I'll explore it from there and maybe follow up with you. Is that cool?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have all their. I think I still have an account. I can give you my password. You can do the course. I think the course is like $50 or something like that, or even less.
All right.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. I'll follow up with you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, follow up with me. And yeah, I think this is so difficult. Doing this research is so difficult. One of the things is I feel it's the bias. Bias is so hard to get out. You believe in your idea so much that, like, for me, it's hard to humble myself. Like, oh, I don't know this. I don't actually know what the problem is. And then because of my pride, it's hard to come up with questions to test it potentially. So bias is one thing that I'm struggling with at this, and also shoot, yeah. So yeah, with the I forget what the second one is, but in terms of bias, like I'm guessing like maybe kind of going to a second individual, maybe someone you're familiar with, someone's really helpful, and getting their thoughts on the questions and things like that would be helpful potentially.
Yeah, I think just that you're recognizing that, you could be biased and that, there could be some attachment to your ideas. Like, I think that's already a great first step.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think when these large corporations hire market research agencies, we are literally the third party, right? So all of the bias is removed. We're the ones conducting the research, but it becomes much more difficult to do that when you're one person starting a company, right? You don't have the resources, it's just not accessible.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of make do with what you have.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's hard especially if it's just yourself, but I would encourage you, like maybe actually that's another opportunity for Edge members is to have, these community sessions where you can share your ideas with other entrepreneurs and just get their feedback. Like, hey, these are my questions. Like, do you think this sounds good? Or do you think I'm missing something? Or do you think, I've made some assumptions I don't know? So maybe, it's peer-to-peer mentorship with other entrepreneurs. That could be like something that could benefit both entrepreneurs. But it's really, really good to have that gut check. So you're definitely on the right track to include other people.
Yeah. And so the idea that I have running is I'm trying to make it easier for people to shop more sustainably. Sometimes what I find is that people give me answers, but it's almost like they want to say the right thing. And I feel like that can sometimes be a barrier in a person want to say the right thing versus if I provide them this, they're going to actually be like, okay, I'm going to use this. Or I guess what I'm trying to say is like the problem may be misjudged based on just interview questions. I don't know if that's ever the case. Potentially I have the problem phrasing the question, which is way more likely, but I don't know if there's any scenario where answering a question may not be the best form of research. I don't know.
I think that's definitely also the case, because oftentimes what happens is, people want to project, people do project, or they will, like you said, it's normal kind of human behavior to want to show the best version of ourselves to the other person. So maybe like these are kind of these interviewing techniques or question asking techniques, because sometimes, you might not know the answer until you actually launch a product and things are out there, and then people either bite or don't bite. But sometimes that's really costly. So sometimes all you really have is some sort of research or some sort of questionnaire. So it's just kind of like mitigating the potential for these biased or projective answers. And there are different techniques or ways to do that. Maybe I can even just do a quick Google search and see if I can find any list for you. But one example is, if you ask somebody, will they do something? Probably they'll say yes, if it aligns with their values. So a good way to ask them is, how many times in the past month have you done this thing? Which is a lot more indicative of their future behavior than their own projection or their own kind of aspiration. So there are these little tricks that you can implement when you're asking the question or phrasing the question. But also it's true though, sometimes you don't know.
It almost sounds like we need how to ask great research questions mentor Monday session.
I'll start the list.
So I'll make notes as we're thinking here through how to best approach research.
Sorry guys, just one more thing, Diego, based on your other question about the ecosystem map, I'm just also putting in another resource by IDEO, which is how to actually define your audience.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Actually, that was a follow-up, but maybe you can go ahead if you want to kind of go into how maybe best practices around that.
Yeah. So I can just quickly share my screen and show you what you would find if you clicked on that. The idea of the ecosystem is really, this is to kind of hit home what I was saying earlier, is you might have the user, which is the actual person, or the entity using your offering. But outside of that, you have the community. Outside of that, you have services. Outside of that, you have institutions. So these are all the things that exist in your ecosystem, and they might not be the exact person you think is your target in the beginning, but are the people or the groups that will impact or be influenced by your offering in some way. So there's some questions here that you can actually go through yourself and they'll help you identify these ecosystem players and learn a little bit more about them. So these tools are all there as well. So, I do encourage you to use them, or at least like read them and see if they would be good for you.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty good exercise to do, just because there seems to be various actors in like selling a service or a product, and just kind of having an understanding of what the needs are, or just understanding who they are in a visual way. That would help in getting going, at least on crafting questions that could help with the insight gathering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How often do you think it should take, or how long do you think it should take? That's one question, and I guess I can already think that that would vary. But what is a good like range of time that someone should approach, especially a entrepreneur who starts as a solopreneur, most cases? How long should they spend on this research phase before moving into the ideation phase?
I won't answer your question directly because it depends.
Right.
But what it depends on is your objectives. So in the beginning, as I said, the first step was to identify the assumptions, identify the objectives, and go until you feel like you have the answers with some degree of confidence. So you won't have 100% confidence, but go until you have 70, 80% confidence based on the research you've done in that hypothesis, or in either affirming or rejecting an assumption. But that's just, that's also arbitrary. So don't quote me on that 70, 80%, but that's what I would do. And then I would stop and I would implement, and I would test again, test the solution again. Or at least create 3 solutions and find the one that's the best out of the 3.
Right.
So that's kind of the answer, but there's no direct answer.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't expect 1 + 1 is 2 kind of answer for sure.
So Diego, I heard half a day, so you can put that down.
Right, have a day.
More than half a day. No, but sometimes it takes.
What's the minimum? I should have just asked that. What's the minimum that you should?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? Sometimes you have just one question, but maybe it defines your product in a big way. Like, should I do e-commerce or should I do brick and mortar? And you might be able to answer that in a week. I don't know, but it totally depends. Just Crystal, before we get to your questions, Miriam, just want to address yours. You asked, it's good to know what % of people prefer to shop online or in person in a certain area. Depends on how big the area is. If it's Canada, you might be able to find reports online on, how many people shop online, how many people shop in person. If it's Ontario, I feel like you'd probably be able to find that data online as well. If it's like Toronto or certain neighborhoods or Mississauga, that might be harder to find. You might be able to find the data, but I think maybe a good approach in that sense is to ask around. You could create your own survey, but I would really suggest that you send that to at least 100 people to get a good representation, but it doesn't have to be a long survey. So you can do something like 10 minutes long and just circulate that within your network, within your extended network, within your targets as much as you can. I'm not sure who your target would be or your consumer would be, the person using the online website, but as many people in that target group as possible. Another option is also to talk to business owners in that area and see what their experience is. So if they have, e-commerce, what is the percentage of people that go online versus shop in person? So these are all things that you can find in different ways. The other consideration, right? So your own neighborhood. Yeah. So I would, like one way to do it is talk to your neighbors, give them that Google Forms link and ask them to pass it on to their neighbors. Like just ask everybody to pass it on within your own neighborhood. You can even go to door and slip flyers under their door. That's just like old school, but that's another way to do it with the link on it or something like that. It's harder to do these days, I'm sure, but you could have also like gone door to door, rang the bell, and then just like written each person's answer, like recorded it yourself. And then also just to talk to the businesses in your own neighborhood and see what their experience is. Maybe they can give you some insight. Awesome. Got a thumbs up. All right, Crystal.
Cool. I just don't want to jump ahead. It's so different because, but if any other people have questions about the surveys, it's all good stuff. And I love how Diego's also on this call because I think it's maybe related. Hopefully this question will help others as well. I'm past this stage, I should say past stage, always validating, right? For sure, always validating, especially different aspects of a product or service. But when it comes to interacting with potential new clients or existing clients, say through digital media, right? What are some tactics that you might have in terms of that kind of research? And I'm thinking more along the lines also of user experience. So I'm trying to develop an application for people to be able to experience of what we do in real life, not just because of the pandemic, but also right now because of the pandemic, right? So understanding what are the features that, or the problems that they might want to be solved first, and how do we prioritize? What are the benefits that we try to focus on first? That makes any sense. So I'm thinking, okay, I guess two kind of questions is when you're looking at interaction with your content on digital media, how do we form good questions? How do we get good data analytics out of that, right? Maybe it's similar to the kind of validation survey questions. And then once you start rolling with your service, your product, if it's an app or it could be, a real person service, what are the things that we can do that we should look out for to understand how well are our clients receiving, the experience from us?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Dio, do you want to take a shot? At answering
Sure.
this?
I mean, I can take a go at it. I just thought of an experience that I had helping someone think through the process of releasing like a 1.0 version of a habit making app, or a habit kind of. It was an app that was intended to help people build good habits, and took us about 4 months to go through the design sprint, so the design research, or the human-centric approach. And ultimately, because he had the skill set to develop, it just made it a lot easier and faster for him to put together a mock-up that worked. And we got to a point where he was already doing the user testing interviews, so he did about 15. And after that, the features totally changed, which I found incredibly insightful. And then he did a second one, and more features were changed. And ultimately, he ended up releasing like the final version, and built in a little extra feature on the menu around kind of improve this app, and it allowed people to submit like a form around what are some of the changes that like you would suggest. And he had it set up, he had the answer set up in a database, going back to what you said, Kanika, around using a spreadsheet, in such a way that it allowed him to kind of color code trends, and he themed them out into different categories. And that would help the thinking process of like, maybe I need to go through another design sprint to test this trend, that's all color coded in green, to see if how that people react to that change. And you iterate over and over and over again. So I would say that's kind of the one of the shared experiences. Build in after you do your design sprints, whether you choose to do one or two, and you get something out there for your market to interact with, build in a mechanism for them that's visible enough and that's communicated clearly for them to be able to tune in and to be able to add their suggestions, and then organize them in such a way that you can analyze them and try to capture themes that will help you eventually go through another run of making changes that are based off of the people who are interacting in the first place. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and Crystal, your first question was about tracking the interaction with the content on digital media. And do you mean on social media, like the content you're producing, or is it, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So have you had experience using the different like analytics that, I guess, anytime you post on Facebook or you post on LinkedIn and stuff like that, you get kind of that user analytics on what people are clicking on and what they're not. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm saying, yeah, just a little bit. And I think maybe there are ways to be a little bit more strategic before we create content, to say, similarly to how we would have those discussion questions, right? Say, okay, these are some things that I want to test. These are some of my assumptions of what people care about. How do I craft in the content, not just to engage people and to let them know what we're about, but also to test some of those assumptions.
Yeah, so I think that's great thinking. And the thing that comes to mind is A/B testing, or producing content that's maybe slightly different. So maybe one content, you talk about one topic, and another content you talk about slightly different topic, and you kind of see where the engagement goes. So what do people click on, what do people like, and what do people share more than the other thing? And that will give you an idea of what is the phrasing. Maybe it's the imagery you're using. People are really attracted to like the images or the videos that you're sharing, and just kind of tracking that over time. And you'll be able to kind of understand in that way. The other tool that is great for doing something like that is also MailChimp. So if you have an ongoing database or ongoing client base, getting their permission to add them to some sort of mailing list, it'll be good for you. And for two reasons: you can, share your content directly with them, and MailChimp has really, really good analytics where it tells you exactly where people clicked, how long they went somewhere, or how long they even opened your newsletter or content for. And the other thing is you can use that as a consistent way to keep in touch with your customers. So you can send them surveys, or you can be like, hey, look, I'm looking to improve this one thing. Like, this product it's for you guys, so please help me by answering these 3 questions. So that's another way to continuing to understand their ongoing experience.
Chris, I had a follow-up thought, and I think it will probably turn to be a question for you. When you're mentioning the content, are you at a point where you're actively releasing content, and the objective is to, maybe the question for you is, what is the objective with the content that you're releasing?
Yeah, to generate awareness, and in my specific case, to start building a wait list for my app when I
Gotcha.
release it. Yeah, and then of course, once the app it's going to be a beta first, and then
Right.
to understand how people are interacting with it, and exactly how do they prioritize the features that they're getting out of it. Yeah.
And what mechanism are you using to get the information out? Are you using like a blog, or you're using social media, or both?
Some of it's theoretical, but yes, or very little bit so far, but yes, social media and a blog.
Okay.
Yeah, and video content as well.
Okay. The benefit of social media is that they have their own sort of tracking mechanisms that you could leverage. I love using Google Analytics when it's a blog. And if you want to follow up with me around setting up Google Analytics, I've done it before, and it in a basic manner, it really does help understand the pathway that someone that goes into your site takes. And so oftentimes you'll be surprised they come from, they end up at, the contact page, then they go into your blog, and then they go and it just really try to understand the drop off rates as well, that you can maybe look at how to, in some way, strategize to reduce the drop off rates. But as far as like content and analytics, social media is great, and adding Google Analytics to your blog as you release more content and create your tags in Google Analytics, so that you can actively measure the results of that specific piece of content that goes out. And yeah, and then also some social tools that allow you to embed sharing mechanisms within the blog for people to share that piece of information quickly onto their social media. Some people, I feel like, I don't do it as often, but I do think that people still do that. When they read something very interesting, they'll immediately want to share it, or most likely copy the link over and send it on WhatsApp to someone else. But I still believe that people would having a mechanism of having a simple way for someone else to share your content can help kind of generate a little bit more exposure.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I'm curious that, for also everyone else on the call, like, are there any other ways that we're forgetting about, or is that pretty much, you don't know what you don't know, right? So I don't know if you have any other ideas besides the, digital marketing and analytics, and that's super awesome. I can't wait to get some more data points.
Okay.
I think when it comes to digital marketing, I know a little bit about it. When it comes to like creating content, I don't know if that's your question, but something that you could do that you could help to create, in a way, works a little bit smarter but not harder, because content is a lot of work. I came across a training that suggested that you could do if like just like a Zoom webinar, like a 1 hour, 30 minutes, 45 Zoom webinar, and then what you can do is you could chop it into bits and pieces, and you can have that as your monthly content. Get someone's on social media, get someone YouTube, and you just circulate that content. So something that I'm doing, and I learned this from Gary Vee as well. But something that I'm doing is in the next couple 6 months, I'm going into inbound marketing. So what that means is that, for example, I could say, um, you know, PPC for plumbing and HVAC contractors. I'll get people to get onto my this is Zoom webinar, make a 1 hour Zoom webinar. After that, I would put it all over social media, get some content on YouTube, because content is king and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, content is really something that could help in terms of in spreading your message. Something else that I want to add, because I don't know if there's any B2B companies here. If there is, I'm not sure. But if you're looking for, when it comes to market research, if you're looking for companies like name, phone number, email address, all that kind of stuff, something that I learned and I started doing was, there's sites like Reference Canada, or Info Canada. You could go on those websites. You could search, for example, I searched for plumbing and HVAC contractors in Brampton making over $1 million in revenue, and I got about 200. So name, phone number, not email. I had to look for that myself, but name, phone number, company revenue, number of employees, and all that kind of stuff. So what I plan to do now is to put that in the campaign, and just cold outreach. Hey, my name is this. I do this. I plan to do that in the next 2 weeks now. So if anyone is B2B looking for that kind of stuff, you can do that as well, and start to get some information the of your prospects. I hope that helps.
Appreciate that, Favor. Thanks for sharing. I want to shift back into asking Kanika a question around the balance of and maybe just like your personal experience with how often do you see that entrepreneurs, and maybe this could tie into your consulting journey, but the balance between primary and secondary research, do you find that oftentimes there's more one of the other, or should there be what should be a good approach to do both in a way that will make sense, especially for someone starting out?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, good question. The balance of secondary and primary research. I would say, there are different methods based on the questions. So I think secondary research is really great for things like competitive analysis. So already, looking into what your competitors are offering online, or even maybe they're not your direct competitors, but a parallel industry. And John, for you, that might be, Yelp, as you said, or Google reviews or something like that. I think things like that, it's really great to use secondary research. But I think personally, at the end of the day, if you're trying to understand people, you have to talk to people. So it's hard to overpass that with secondary research. You might be able to find some already done research or some reports that you can reference. But I would also, encourage, even if that does come out of secondary research, still to validate in primary research.
Yeah. I think that's part of the. I think just through the journey of working with various entrepreneurs, and even myself when I was in that process, and I think in some ways at Edge I've sort of done more primary by talking to entrepreneurs and sort of meeting with them and understanding their needs to then develop things like Mentor Mondays and just kind of improve our programs, because that's kind of where Mentor Mondays came from in the first place. And so I would definitely say that in my journey I've done a lot more primary than secondary. I think I've done secondary when I needed to understand the ecosystem, like who are the players, who are the other incubators, or even when I had my agency, I was looking at what are the other small boutique agencies that exist that are out there. But ultimately, it always shifted to like, well, I need to know specifically about those who I'm trying to serve. And so I would then start, pre-COVID times, knock on doors, hop on calls. Quite frankly, actually, Crystal, point that I wanted to bring up is I didn't do too much content. I just felt it took too long. And I guess in that time we weren't tied up with the COVID scenario, so it was easier for me to go to a plaza and go door to door. Whereas right now it seems we're all having to depend on the virtual world, but maybe partaking in more online activities that are relevant to your world, that could get you what you're looking for faster than putting or taking a long time to write a blog and getting it out there and hoping to get the analytics to pick up on that. Just a random thought on that end. But yeah, I've always ended up going back to more primary research because, like you said, Kanika, just really addressing the people who are serving. It's probably a good as a starting point, at least at the beginning.
My question for that is really, with research and when you're having a conversation with someone, the biases that might creep in or people wanting to give you the nice answer, whereas their actions and how they engage with your content, right? How they share what you do or how they interact with your actual service. I thought that might be more, less biased, but I didn't know if I was thinking about it in the right way. It's kind of, I guess, why I had that not as well-formed question as I had hoped. I don't know what you guys think of that.
That's a very strong point, though. I think this is, I would actually want to kind of shift that question to you, Kanika. What would be your thoughts on that approach?
I think it's two kind of different sources of data. So what you learn from somebody interacting with your content doesn't necessarily tell you about your product or your offering as much as it does about your content, right? So you may have, a really awesome offering or something that's really relevant, but that one piece of content may not resonate with a lot of people, even though your offering might. Do you see what I'm saying there? So I think it's two different it's telling you two different things. It's testing two different hypotheses or two different objectives, in my opinion. Whereas if you're going to people and talking to them about your offering directly, that tells you more about, what they, what their perspectives or what their experiences are in interacting with your offering. Whereas if it's content, it's more about the content, even though it is tied to your offering. Yeah.
Yeah, getting away from bias is certainly a challenging and daunting task. I think I will go back to that like how are I'm saying in general, everyone here, how are you framing your questions when you're in those, when you happen to have those opportunities to be in front of someone and ask them questions, and framing those in a way that at least minimizes that bias, could be helpful. If you compare them to how you were asking them before, you maybe can see the improvement in the responses. And that could also come across as well in your content in some ways, to frame your content in a manner that could help mitigate some of that bias. But unfortunately, we're up on time. We have to work towards wrapping up.
Sorry, just quickly, I've just shared a link. Sorry, Crystal, your content is your service. Got it. Okay. I've just shared a link here that is a blog post, and it just has kind of like a summary of asking unbiased questions. So it might be a good place to start, just taking a look at that. The other really like hot tip I just want to share is also, when you're going into asking questions, don't say this is your company, like, hey, this is my company, I'm asking for it, because then people will want to be nice to you and say, hey, your idea is great. Say, look, I'm doing just research and trying to understand X, Y, and Z about this topic. And then at the end, you can tell them, hey, by the way, this is my idea I'm working on. But just other things to help mitigate a little bit.
Yeah, it's another great tip. Well, thanks everyone for making time today on a Monday evening to join today's Mentor Mondays. Thank you, Kanika, as well for coming out today, and for everyone else to hanging out. Hope that this session was valuable. Please feel free to follow up with us. I believe, Kanika, at some point you may be sharing the slides that we could distribute around to those who registered. This Mentor Mondays will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. We have a playlist going for the Mentor Mondays, and so if you want to get a refresher or check it out again, that's where it's going to be. And Mariam, I think you're asking a question about the October 8th. I would encourage you to check out their YouTube channel and see if it's there. And if not, please follow up with me. I am going to leave you with my email, and I will certainly, and anyone else who would like to follow up with me, leave you my email so that you can connect with me, and I can point you in the right direction, and hopefully get you those slides if we have them. Aside from that, I just want to pause for a moment, and at this point, this is where we are just going to take a quick